All right, good evening, Source Nation, and welcome to SRN Live Television. I'm your host, Dr. Samori Swygert of the Pendulum, and today we have a very amazing show for you lined up. But before I go any further, please let me thank our sponsors because they make all this possible. And they are Zuliana Health and Fitness, Paper to Film Productions, Renovations, New Covenant of Praise Worship Center, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Blend to Blend Juice Bar Boutique, and Urban Grandstand Digital. Source Nation, if you would like to advertise with SRN Live Television, you want to contact Kathy B at kathylyn1971@gmail.com. That's kathylyn1971@gmail.com. That is KATHYLYNN1971@gmail.com. Or you can also contact Tracy Jeffcoat. That is TRECIEFFCOAT@gmail.com. Make sure that you share this stream broadcast on your social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms. Now, today we're going to have a very enlightening show for you. It's important and it's imperative that we have these discussions because there's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of things that are going on in this world and in our society. And a lot of times we don't understand what we're looking at. We don't understand what we're dealing with. It's hard to put a name or a finger on it. But when you get to the root of it, and what I'm talking about is racism, we look at how it impacts our jobs, our careers. We look at how it impacts our educational status. We look at how it affects us economically. We look at how it impacts us when it comes to housing. So many different things. And today we're going to talk about how racism psychologically impacts us and affects us, and hopefully get down to some remedies. And so what I did was I enlisted the expertise and the contributions of a good brother by the name of Dr. Andre Fields. He is out of Michigan, and he's going to share some very enlightening information. His brother is amazing. I mean, cranked out some books, and we're going to be talking about his one book today, The Psychology of Racism. Dr. Andre Fields, how you doing, good sir?
I'm doing real good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Well, listen, I gave you a little brief intro, but what I'd like to do is I'll let you kind of share with the audience a little bit about what you've done, what you do, and the different publications that you've done.
Okay. Professionally, I work at Grand Rapids Community College. And so my main job is that of a personal counselor and then also career counselor. And then I'm also the director of a black male fraternity here at GRCC. So those are my two main gigs. In the last maybe 4 years, I guess I became an author. I published 13 books for the last 4 years. Yeah. And thank you, man. Thank you.
13. That's a lot of books, brother.
yeah, that's a few, man. I'm taking a hiatus right now, though. I'll probably get back on the right thing maybe in about a year.
Okay.
Yep. And so all of those publications relate to the topic of racism. Mm-hmm. So they're written for different audiences, ranging from children to adolescents to white people, black people, all people. And so they all essentially provide the reader with information about not only what racism is, what types of forms it takes,
yes,
and also mental and emotional strategies you can take to make sure that either, that you're not racist and or not allowing racism to negatively impact, your thinking and your feeling, and ultimately your life outcomes.
Good. See, all right. That's what I like to hear right there. That's what I like to hear.
All right.
All right, cool. So I want you to talk to us. Well, you know what? First of all, being that you cranked out these books, I'd be remiss if I didn't even let people know how they can, access these books in person. What's your contact information and the different ways and means in which they can actually purchase your book?
Okay, yeah. So they're all available through Amazon.
Okay.
If you were to go to Amazon and just type in, you like Andre Fields, PhD. And that should give you a list of all of the books that I've written. My email address is afields@grcc.edu. That's the best way to reach me. If someone has questions after this interview, or if you want more information on how to get my books, I can easily send a link to a person if they email me as well.
Okay. Did you say Instagram or anything, or Twitter, or?
I'm on Facebook, Andre.
Oh.
Yep, and it's you'll recognize my head, you know,
Yeah,
in the picture. Oh yeah. But I'm not on Instagram or Twitter.
Okay.
And I also have a website. It's something it's in the making, infancy stage. But it's called the Institute of African American Psychology. That website is www.theiaap.org. So you can go there. That kind of breaks down a lot of different models, or several models that I've kind of developed to empower Black Americans in this country.
Okay. Right. So we'll get down to some questions that I think are germane to the topic of today. Now, I think about the era that we're in. There's a lot of racial tension now. You have, well, I have a flag behind me, right?
Oh yeah.
That's, for me, some people can be like, well, how do you have the flag behind you? Well, I look at it like this too. One, my ancestors helped build this country. They built the White House. Their ingenuity and genius built the patents and inventions that were stolen and never given credit for. They have built the economy for America for centuries off of their labor. So yes, I rep what my ancestors have contributed. But we also understand what also comes with the flag. Now, we're in this era where we have President Donald Trump in office. And even during Barack Obama's administration, there's those two presidents have been very, they have kind of stoked a lot of racial emotions on between Blacks and whites, literally, and now you definitely see a lot of the Latino community. They're even under this administration. It's a lot going on with the Latino brothers and sisters racially. Under President Barack Obama's administration, you had a lot of individuals in this country, a lot of citizens that felt like he was incapable, incompetent. They did whatever they could to try and get him out of office. They blocked many of his, just the legislation. They would be very much, they would impede, and they would be obstacles. They would filibuster like all day to block bills that they know were needed for the country, but they did that to pretty much shame and just make him look like a bad president. And really is because, let's be plain and honest, it was because he was Black. Now you have, before, as a matter of fact, when he was getting elected, they had that meeting in the caucus room where they were like, we're going to make sure we're going to make a pact, we're going to make an oath that we will block him in every move that he makes. And so you have that. Now you have President Trump in office, and then when Trump got inaugurated, you started seeing more, because America's always had a racial component to it because of the way that it was, through inception. You see a real burgeoning and a buoying to the surface of racists, white supremacists. You have just so much going on. So many violent attacks. You look on social media, you see people just shouting out their car windows. You see people calling the police on Black people, all of this. And so with that, I want to know, can people subconsciously And subliminally, people are impacted by racism.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't know it, right? But as a psychologist, here's some things that I want to know. How do you think we psychologically process the deaths of Black people at the hands of law enforcement? As a psychologist speaking, it's one thing to see it maybe once, but we're seeing it like back to back to back to back to back. It has to have some type of impact on our psyche. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very deep. But yeah, there is a conscious impact and a subconscious impact. And I think it's a collective impact, meaning the symbolism, for example, of Trayvon Martin being killed. The symbolism in that, for one, if you were a young Black boy, between the ages of 8 and 12, that symbolism, it feeds or it affirms what society says, meaning it makes you feel inferior, not appreciated, taken for granted, and that, of course, your life means a little less. Put another way, when a grown man chases a little boy into the dark, shoots him and comes out and never does a day in jail for it, that communicates, especially at a young age, to a young Black boy that his life is less than valuable, not as valuable as a non-Black life. And so I think, we've seen these things over the years, collectively as a group. And I really think that Black people, we have this perpetual collective grief, meaning we constantly live in a psychological state of always losing something. So person, they experience grief when there's a loss. If you lose your job, you lose your relationships, you lose a life, you automatically grieve. Well, because of racism, Black people always have to collectively take a lot of losses. And so I always say, first of all, Black Americans are the youngest race on the planet. What I'm saying is this: 400 years ago, we didn't even exist. 400 years ago, we were African. But because of the mixing of bloods, European blood, Asian blood, Native American blood, Hispanic blood, now we're basically a new race. And the thing that sets us apart from all other races is that our whole existence has been a perpetual loss, meaning we've been struggling since day one in America.
True.
And so at the end of the day, just like trauma can be passed down from one generation to the next, collectively, we have experienced enough trauma to where we now function with this collective fear of just always losing things. And that's what discrimination basically means. It means to have something taken away from you or withheld. And so when Trayvon Martin, with his life being lost, collectively, we grieve. On the white side, it might be a tough statement to some people, but when they see a little Black boy get killed like that, or a grown man get killed, subconsciously it affirms their sense of white superiority. We have the power and we can do these things, and may not verbalize it, but that also means it sucks to be you. Whether a person sympathizes with the situation or not, still subconsciously it still affirms their sense of white power.
Right.
And I think in general, because of history, most white Americans function with a white superiority complex. Most won't admit it, but they have been conditioned to believe that they are superior.
Yeah.
So when those things happen, it, subconsciously and consciously, it affirms in their own thinking superiority.
True. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something else. I think about the like I said, with the superiority complex and making people feel less than and feeling like they can do whatever and get away with it. Yeah, it reminds me of when Trump was campaigning and he was holding his campaign rallies, and then when you would have some Black people in attendance, he would be like, look, go ahead and throw him out, I mean, punch him in the face, I'll pick up the bill. Like, just kind of like, really? This is how we You can operate like that. That's just okay. Yeah, well, okay. Well, I guess maybe that's your superiority complex. You know, it's interesting. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, so being that we're in the whole pool of psychology and racism, trauma, psychological trauma. We see the Eric Gardners, we see the Philando Castiles, and Philando Castile is a very great case study when we talk about psychological trauma of the victims' families, because his girlfriend was in the car and the daughter was right in the back seat when he was shot and killed. Both the mother and the daughter saw Philando get shot and killed by a cop. Can you speak to what you think or how they process this psychological trauma? It's one thing for us to see it, but for the loved ones, like they have an actual connection to him. And like you said, to have something taken away, and you see it in front, like literally he was no more than a foot away from both of them. That has to have some type of psychological effect and trauma. So can you speak to that as far as for the family, actual families of the victims?
Yeah, it's definitely, just layers of compounded trauma, meaning, of course, the symbolism of, hey, we're Black Americans. We just took a loss of another Black man, through the hands of police brutality. But it's compounded because, like you said, there's a blood tie, the kinship, direct kinship, and blood. Of course, that just maximizes the trauma. And then it starts to trickle down because now the child doesn't have her father figure. Whatever income they had before his death has probably been cut in half.
Yes. Yeah.
And so all of the indirect consequences of that man losing his life, again, where there's a consequence, the mind and the emotions always feel it as well. So now that they're probably more than likely, his children are more likely to grow up poor. And with poverty comes a whole nother host of consequences. And so it just keeps compounding and compounding. And just like I said, general grief, just knowing that, again, we took another L, we took another loss. So it's compounded, it's worse for the family. It's sad enough, he got killed, a year or two ago. The ripple effects of that will probably go on for the next, grandchildren.
Right.
All in that one moment. That one moment is going to last for generations.
Wow. Very interesting, man. Very interesting. And it's funny that you brought up the living situation, because I was having a conversation with my friend and I was like, we're not thinking about the full magnitude and the other ramifications of seeing these individuals killed. I'm like, we need to look at it also like, look, when these police are committing these murders, they are actually destabilizing communities across the nation. Because like you said, what if a family, they had a home, they had an apartment that was based on a 2-parent income to sustain that rent or sustain that mortgage, and now instantly you've cut that out. Well, unless that other parent is able to has the ability to supplement or compensate for that deficit or that loss of that financial contribution of income, then it's like they're forced to move to another apartment, downgrade. They may lose their mortgage, and thus have to move out of it. And from that, you may have to move to different districts. So schools change. People understand, and they're doing this on a regular basis. So many other police killings that don't even make it to the news, so it's kind of like we have to take full inventory of the impact and ramifications of these police killings, so.
Oh yeah. Just the masculine affirmation too, speaking of purely psychological, children or his daughter, I believe.
Speak up just a little bit.
Yeah, his daughter and his, I don't know if that was his wife or fiance or whatever, but now also have a void of masculine affirmation, meaning whatever affirmation he brought to that family, whatever emotional support he brought, that's all gone.
Right.
And so again, that's trickling down because now his daughter potentially, hopefully not, but she could potentially function with issues that people develop when they don't have masculine affirmation.
Right.
It's a terrible situation, man. That, like I said, the 2-second decision can trickle down for the next couple generations. So,
right. That's serious, man.
Oh yeah.
I have some more questions, but before I go any further with those questions, one thing I want you to do, tell us a little bit about your book, The Psychology of Racism. Tell me how that concept came into being and say, look, you know what, I want to write this book specifically at this angle. How did you give birth to that concept? What can readers expect to look forward to as they read this and take away from it? And how is it organized?
Okay, so that book, I say it's about 35% my dissertation.
Okay.
So my dissertation was basically I researched Black males in academia. And so as you probably know, essentially Black males, they bring up the rear or they come in last place on all measures of academic success nationally. And so as a psychologist, you know, you always have to have a theory, a working theory on why things are the way they are. So I wanted to come up with not only a theory, but then of course do research to see if it's accurate or not. And so essentially the question is, why do Black males fail? That's really what the question was for me. And so the easiest answer that's thrown around in academia is that it's poverty. And that's people have been pulling a poverty card and saying, well, if Black people just had more money, they would do better in school. Element of truth to that, but I believe there's another variable that's even more powerful than poverty, and that variable is racism and stigma. But I'll prove real quick that poverty is not the answer. I'm gonna use one statistic. Okay. Poor white males outperform middle class and upper class Black males academically. Measures, graduation, GPA, SAT scores, ACT scores, all of that. So if it was all about socioeconomic status, then middle class Black boys would outperform lower class white males. True. So that shows that it's not about economics.
Right.
So, yeah. And so the answer to me is the one thing that Black males experience that no other portion of the population experiences is national stigma. Meaning they have been given a brand of inferiority, and they've constantly been given a message that they're less than. And so I always use this, the parent analogy. America's like a parent. If your mother and father tell you every day that you're stupid and you're not going to do much in life and you're not going to go far no matter how hard you try, something's going to go wrong. Sooner or later, you believe that. The whole country tells you that on a day-to-day basis. How can a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid outsmart a whole country and not believe that? So Black males are the most stigmatized portion of the population, even more stigmatized than Black females or Hispanic males or any other category of citizen. And so that intense social abuse, that intense marketing and branding of this inferiority symbolism is so ingrained in American culture now that it literally disempowers a Black male by the time they're 12 or 13. Unless they have some uncommon or superior level of resilience, most of them fall through the cracks. So I always tell people, the sad thing about America is that it's set up in a way that let's say a Black man has superior intelligence. A white man with average intelligence will look as if he's just as intelligent as him because of the way the country is set up. Meaning the country is set up to where, you know, we're all born with strengths and weaknesses. A good parent brings out their children's strengths, and they try to suppress or support their weaknesses. America brings out the best in its white males and it brings out the worst in its black males. Meaning, let's say you just struggle with depression or sad anxiety, or you have a learning challenge or whatever it may be, because America is such a terrible parent. All of those things that's what weaknesses do. They surface during stress. They surface during hard times. And so because black males are constantly stigmatized, they're always operating at a higher level of stress than the typical portion of the population. And we know stress brings out the worst in us usually, at least sustained. So if you live a life of stress that's put upon you because of society, your weaknesses are going to come to the surface more than those who are not exposed to that, all that negativity. I hope that makes sense, man.
No, it makes a whole lot of sense. What I pick up is, being that black males are more stigmatized, and I'll go as far as to say even propagandized. When it comes to education, even their teachers at a young age, the teachers can be so conditioned from just America's position on black men that they say, okay, well, I got this young black male student. He's not really worth my time, my full time and attention. I don't have to give him as much support or mentoring, just all the different things that the encouragement, all the different things that a child needs to grow academically, perform scholastically, just be an overall, good person, productive person in society. They're not there to reinforce that. You're actually stripping that away. Whereas, like you said, when it comes to white males, they get that energy, they get that time, they get that attention, they get that support, they get that reinforcement. That's good, Billy. And so, yeah, I think it does. It creates this psychological complex. It really does. Matter of fact, you and we were talking the other day about I forgot what the analogy was, but you were saying the coach's son.
The coach's son. Yeah. So that analogy is basically this. The starting quarterback thinks that he's the starting quarterback because he thinks he's better than a second string quarterback. He thinks he's faster. He has a better arm, better athletic intelligence, quicker, et cetera, and he totally ignores the fact that his father is the coach. And so that's how white Americans function. They feel like everything that they have acquired is totally based upon their personal merit, their intelligence, their work ethic, their morals, et cetera, ignoring the fact that systemic discrimination has played a part.
Yes.
To some capacity, whether it's a huge capacity or a small capacity.
It's always there.
Systemic discrimination has assisted every white American to some degree. I call it the white man's burden. All right, white American's burden. Black America has one too, but what is white American's burden is this: acknowledging the fact that racism exists, discrimination exists, but then presenting the contradiction that it doesn't impact life and outcomes of Black Americans. So that's this diametric opposition that doesn't make sense to them. Try to make themselves believe that, yep, racism exists, but it don't impact your life or my life. That's a contradiction that can't sit together.
Right.
When you hear all these different individuals saying that, hey, white privilege doesn't exist, and pull yourself up by your psychological bootstraps and all of that, all of those are attempts to deal with that contradiction that's sitting right in front of them.
Right.
They gaslight it.
Right.
Gaslight us with it. And so next thing you know, that's why sometimes it can be infuriating, being African-American. Very frustrating because, again, it's like a bad parent. Your parent is telling you every day you should be doing just as well as your brother. However, the parent abuses you mentally and emotionally and does not affirm you, but affirms the other one. And makes you think that you're crazy for not being empowered enough to do the things that you need to do to be a successful young man. So Yeah. So that's, yeah. So the coach's son, that's all that is, you know,
Yeah.
not acknowledging that you've been assisted by the system.
Okay. Now, how is your book structured? How would you say your book is structured for the reader?
Okay, so it's basically broken into three parts. So the first part basically breaks down the psychology of racism. And when I say the psychology of racism, all I'm saying is this, how racism, stigma, and discrimination impacts how Black males think, feel, and behave. And so it's broken down, it breaks down this systematic process to where essentially a Black man is born with a blank slate. And by the time they're probably 6 or 7, they have internalized that external stigma that's been going around. And so I don't know if you remember the study where they do the black doll and the white doll study. They asked the little kids around, 5, 6, 7 years old, which doll is better, which doll is smarter. A 5, 6, 7-year-old kid has realized at a very early age that in this country, he's looked at as less than. And the deeper part of it to me is, you know, we talk a lot about how white people are racist and how they look at us as inferior, but American racist condition is so deep that we look at ourselves in a similar manner, meaning we have internalized that negativity so deeply that, again, sometimes if we're not cautious, we see a Black man, we think less than of him, don't know anything about it except for the color of his skin. It's demonstrated in that study. And so the first part of the book basically talks about the methodical process by which Black males psychologically internalize inferiority and then begin to live their lives accordingly. So once a Black male has internalized that stigma, one of the first things that happen is a loss of esteem, a loss of value. You know, self-esteem just basically means what value you give yourself. And after that value goes away, then, you lose a sense of efficacy. Efficacy is the sense that you feel like you have power over your life and that you can accomplish goals and attain a vision and a dream. When you live in a country that historically and even in modern day times takes things away from people because of the color of their skin, you feel a loss of power. Like, what I do at some point, I'm not going to get what I deserve.
Right.
You're dealing with a young man that has no value or a low amount of value, and also a young man that feels like he might not have what it takes to outmaneuver a system.
Yes. So
it's two levels of disempowerment. So I work with Black males. The fraternity I was telling you about is about 115 males in there. Every semester we do focus groups, and we talk about some of the challenges that they mentally and emotionally facing during a typical semester. And the number one psychologically that we get is these guys experience a lot of the fear of failure. So we have to constantly talk with them about dealing with that fear of failure. And so sometimes people say, why do you think there's such a big fear of failure in the Black male college student population? And to me, it makes sense. If you live in a country that takes things away from people who look like you or withholds things from people who look like you, you're going to have this fear that, man, what if I invest all this time, money, and energy into school, get my degree, and when I get out there, I don't get what I deserve? And so that fear of that potential failure causes a Black male to do is kind of lose hope in the educational system, which then manifests itself in a lessened input as it relates to doing well in school, meaning not trying as hard. Many risks involved with you actually trying to dream and invest your energy in your future. So I'm sorry. So the first half of the book, first portion of the book, it breaks down that whole process. And then the second half of the book basically is a counseling, a therapeutic model designed for Black males.
Okay.
It's 12 sessions of guided questioning that a therapist can ask a Black male that relates to either specifically racism or other social experiences that Black males have in America. So like I said, it can range from racism to fatherlessness, media influence, all the different things that, that impact the Black male development. The questions within that book, the majority of them have came over, years of providing therapy to Black males. I've been doing what I'm doing, for what, I think 9 years now. My therapy sessions, and then with my mentoring and success coaching sessions, thousands of hours, just literally having one-on-one conversations with Black males. So it's kind of like just these common themes, these common strategies, techniques, conversations, whatever you want to call it, just a accumulation of all those things, but put under on a framework for therapy.
Right.
Yeah. So that's basically how the problem got started, the internalized stigma, and how to address it.
I was listening to you explain the prior section, and so, like I work in a hospital, I work as a clinical pharmacist. So we, I dispense all sorts of medication. One thing that always sticks out in listening to what you were describing, it almost sounds like what happens when physicians prescribe Viagra, Cialis. What am I talking about? Performance anxiety. Usually when you have some of these males, like, a lot of men, whether it's because of aging or drops in testosterone, males may lose their libido, or they may have other organic physiological processes that may cause a weakening of their sex drive. But one of the other things is just a mental block, performance anxiety. The fact or fear, the fear that I will not perform well automatically shuts down the mental stimulus, and I will not be able to perform. And so then it leads to mediocrity. And so it sounds kind of like the same thing with racism and these young men. The fact that they have been told this, they've been fed this, and that society expects this of them, they have that fear of failure.
Oh, yeah.
And that same fear of failure is just like that performance anxiety. And so they, when it's time to perform, they don't perform. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So that performance anxiety leading to mediocrity and failure.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's that anxiety is two theories that exist on that relate to what you're just talking about. I'm sure you heard of it. There's a stereotype threat. This is something that Black Americans experience when they're in educational settings, meaning the pressure of not fulfilling the stereotype that Black people are intelligent becomes a distraction, and it produces a level of anxiety that sabotages your ability to think critically and use your intelligence. And then the other one is imposter syndrome. Black males have been told all their lives that they're not supposed to be successful. So when you're sitting in the classroom or you're sitting in a board meeting or whatever, like you're not supposed to be there. And so that produces some social anxiety, like I'm not supposed to be here. And the reverse of that is the other people in your setting are also consciously and subconsciously communicating to you that you were not supposed to be here.
Not supposed to be.
Yeah. So that whether it's deliberate or indeliberate, no matter what, we all as beings, we communicate subconsciously to some capacity our beliefs.
That's right.
If Black males are inferior, no matter how nice you want to be, you're going to communicate that from time to time when you're interacting with a Black male. So yeah, imposter syndrome for people listening, and then if you're studying stereotype threat, especially if you have Black males that that might be in college, you might want to get them some information related to that. So you kind of normalize it.
Andre, I wanted to ask you, you said there you have founded your fraternity for Black males. What's the starting age or criteria age for?
So I work at a community college. So typically anywhere between 17 and 60. So we've had guys, like I said, fresh out of high school 17 years old, and we've had older, non-traditional males who are wanting to finish up the degree that they started years ago. We got guys coming fresh out of prison, done 30 years,
Oh, wow.
want to go to college, and so they're older guys as well. But there's no age limit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just curious, because it sounds like something that I'm willing to spread for people to look into that may have sons or young males, and just want to know if there's any age criteria.
Yeah. I mean, I have one of the books that I put together. It breaks down as a step-by-step manual on how you would build this or that program at a school, a church, or any type of organization.
Okay, good.
The EPS model. So if anybody listening is curious about it, it's the book titled The EPS Model.
APS model?
EPS.
Oh, EPS. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I want to talk about this too. As I was saying before, we think about Michael Jordan, we think of Magic Johnson, we think of LeBron. We may think of a lot of athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when they are prolific in history, you often hear them talk about having a winner's mentality or a winner's mind state. Mm-hmm. As we are now raising children, we're giving birth to children. How do we psychologically create a winner's mind state when it comes time for them to compete in a society that's highly racialized, and a winner's mind state when it comes to combating racism, psychologically preparing them for that? What's your take on that?
Well, so I would say the best way to empower a Black male to have that winner's mentality, the number one thing is that he can't internalize the loser mentality. Mm-hmm. So it's really just having a system of affirmation, meaning more propaganda on the strengths of Black males, meaning more mentoring relationships with Black males, more information, more instructions, more inspiration. All of those different things is really basic to human development, only has to be racialized for the Black male. So you can't effectively prepare a Black male for success without helping him become aware of his race-related barriers that he's going to come across. And so, like I said, just positive messaging, strong relationships, mentoring, Black males in education. This is across the board, research-wise, they do better when they're being educated, or they're being educated in a system where they have relationships with people within the systems. Meaning you're not just my teacher, but you're a person I have rapport with and talk to about other things. Because once a Black child especially knows that you care about them, they're willing to learn from you.
Yes.
But until that you can have that rapport for whatever reason, it's harder to educate or engage a Black child in the process of learning. It's relationships, and it really makes sense. In a culture where you've been alienated and rejected all your life, and then you go into an educational system, especially in my case, it's predominantly whites, it makes sense in general that the one thing you're probably going to need to be successful is a relationship, somebody to affirm you, somebody you can connect with, belong to, etc. And so after years and years of rejection, it necessitates the need for a relationship at some point. Mm-hmm. That's more affirming.
Wow. I was listening to you break that down, and it's so funny. I had this conversation. I have what's called the 3 C's when it comes to making sure excellence is achieved. And the 3 C's are in this order.
Okay.
Comfort, establishing a comfort level. Mm-hmm. Competency, then comes confidence, in that order. So as you were talking, the first level you already broke down. So comfort, you have to have an environment that fosters comfort. Like you said, there's a good rapport You're there with somebody that cares and somebody that affirms you. When you have that there, you create a comfort and a trusting environment that fosters growth. It fosters that environment where the young male is able to be receptive of what you're trying to impart on them, right? So now that you've established the comfort, now you want to establish the competency, meaning, okay, you're comfortable, you're receptive. Now let me pour into you, and I'm going to pour into you as much as I can, and I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you and keep pouring and measuring and testing, and I'm going to make it to the point where it's routine, to the point where it is just a reflex, to it's just a habit. Like when I say go get it, you go get it. Just there's no questions asked. It's just that's what it is. Like you're trained to go. You know what I'm saying? And from there, once that young male is comfortable and they are competent, confidence comes automatically, because you're confident when you know you can perform. When you know you can perform, that's when the confidence comes, because you know, yeah, I can do that. You want me to just run 3 miles? I was running 20 miles every day. Okay, that ain't nothing. Let me do this real quick. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I like your model. I like that.
Thank you, sir. I like yours too.
That's real. I want to ask you another one too. Let me see what I have down here. This one, I may be stretching it, but I just feel, I mean, because there, you have the DSM, I think it's the DSM-5 out now. I look at some of the different names and as being a pharmacist, we dispense a lot of antipsychotic medication, things like that. But you look at like some of the DSM-5, and you're just like, man, they got terms for things that you wouldn't even think they had terms for. So now I'm like, look, is it possible that racism can potentiate or create some sort of mental illness in Blacks?
I would definitely say yes. I think that, basically how we think, feel, and behave is a combination of genetics and your environment. And so if you live in an environment that's stressful because of your race, you're walking in this maze, and the color of your skin is creating situations that, again, are somewhat traumatic or very stressful. It's like anything else. You might start developing anxiety. You look at a grad student, all white, university maybe, just for an example, feel like he's not being treated fairly by the administrators or the teachers or whatever. That produces a level of anxiety.
Right.
Same with depression. Depression is based upon hopelessness. And so if generationally, and now you look at your life day by day, if you're not careful as a Black American, if you internalize the hopelessness that racism can sometimes produce, yes, that could probably lead to depression. And so, I think it is. I think race can trigger anxiety and depression. Yeah. Good question.
I'm glad that we have this conversation and we had that question and answer session right there, because I honestly believe that a lot of things that are going on now, and like especially the despair, you factor poverty into that too, because what we're seeing now is a rapid accumulation and calcification of wealth at the top. And so, Blacks, we're, at the bottom of the totem pole or the bottom of the pyramid. And the things that we have to deal with is daunting, on top of the fact that racism is there. That's a lot for a lot of people to internalize. And it's just like, people will snap, and people are snapping. It's just like, man, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Oh yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, this is a good question I want to ask you. Actually, this is a very important question. As we talk about solutions to this problem of racism in America,
Mm-hmm.
work must be done psychologically. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what, in your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
what type of work or psychological work should be done for both blacks and whites in America in this 21st century?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I start off with blacks. The two things psychologically, and I work with this with the males I work with, and I've had to work with it within myself.
Yeah.
But it's two psychological posturings that a black man can develop that will hurt him. And either it's a sense of entitlement. That's one of the worst internalizations a black male can have, meaning this: America has taken things away from me and my ancestors for hundreds of years. America owes me something. In theory, that's true. However, the problem is America's never going to give you anything.
Right.
Right. So if you sit up and wait on that package is coming in the mail and it never happens, what happens is we're slower behind, and you don't put enough effort towards your own vision and your own goals. Because what a lot of black males, especially if they grew up in the system, their parents on welfare, they feel like whatever it is I need to make it, the system has to give it to me.
Right.
And yes, any good system would assist its citizens. However, the way America works, you're going to have to get it on your own. And so I always let guys know racism will always exist. America played us, they owe us, but we're not getting it. So now you got to go out and get it yourself. And then also, I put the responsibility of black progress on black Americans. When you ask me, whose fault is it that black Americans struggle in this country? I blame white discrimination. Mm-hmm. But the other side of the coin is this: yep, I blame the bad parent, right? I blame the bad parent, but it's the responsibility of black Americans to make things better for ourselves. So another example would be, let's say this child was raised in a terrible home, abusive home, mentally abused, sexually abused, physically abused. And if he grows up at the age of 18 and commits, a crime and ends up in prison, the reason why that boy ended up in prison because he had some terrible parents. But now that he's in prison, and when he gets out, now he's now though responsible for his future. Despite the fact that he had a terrible upbringing, as a man, you now are responsible. Let your past dictate your future, and that's the same with black Americans. Socially, we've been cheated and abused. It sucks, but guess what? Now we gotta get ourselves together and take responsibility for it, and not expect for America to do it for us.
Right.
Avoiding the sense of entitlement, and then psychologically taking responsibility for your future.
Okay.
White Americans, they have to unlearn that superiority. And so, like I said earlier, this is why they have that superiority complex, is because I said earlier that they feel like everything that they get is accomplish or accumulate is totally related to their personal efforts, and they ignore racism. So if you think that everything you have attained in this society is all you, and you ignore racism, then you're going to say everything that black people haven't achieved is on them as well. I don't know if I'm saying that clear, but if you ignore racism as a white America, or ignore the impact of racism on a black American experience, you feel like you're better. So that kid, I'm going to keep using this analogy. The kid, the mom has two twins.
Yeah.
And she abused one of the children and not the other. If the child that was not abused does not acknowledge the fact that his brother wasn't treated fair, he's going to think he's better than his brother.
Right.
Yeah. So he's going to say, if he doesn't acknowledge the fact that mom abused him, he's better than him, and he's also going to have frustration towards his brother. And that's why right now white Americans have this collective frustration at black people. It's like, how you have a family reunion? And if you look at America like a family, to white Americans, When a family reunion, we look like the uncle that ain't doing nothing with his life and everybody frustrated with him. How they treat us with that collective frustration because they ignore the fact, again, that America hasn't been fair.
Right.
Give themselves that illusion that, we're better than you. And another thing, they don't say it this way, but this is how they say it. If me and my people went through what you and your people went through, we're doing better. That's basically what they're saying. So that's that superiority thing. They're saying, what they're saying is whatever it takes to go through racism, stigma, and discrimination, we would have it. You guys just don't have it. You don't have what it takes. That superiority complex, it manifests itself, through verbal communication, nonverbal communication, mannerisms, subconscious mannerisms, all those different things. They manifest when Black and white Americans interact.
Right.
So just that's the number one thing, that superiority complex. And so being cognizant of the fact that trained to be racist, more than likely you are racist. There's 325 million Americans. Percent of those are white Americans. Out of 62% of white Americans, 53% admit that they're racist or that they have an aversion towards Black Americans. What that means is that there are 115 million white Americans in this country who have an aversion towards Black people.
And that's a lot.
And that's where those 115 million people are. They're in the school system, they're in the financial system, they're in the criminal justice system. They're everywhere. They're in a community.
Yes.
And they're in every structure within the superstructure.
Right. Courts, hospitals, everything.
And what happens is those collective races put together covertly and overtly to unfairly distribute resources. Where the code comes in. The code of taking care of our own, it's white tribalism. That's all tribalism is. Making it easier for my people and making it harder for your people so that we can sustain power.
Right.
Yeah, and so
deprive so we can thrive.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So just being cognizant of the fact that, hey, probably racist. It'll help you if you really want to do the right thing. Monitor your behavior, monitor your decision making. A lot of white people try to say, I'm not racist. I look at the spirit of racism like the spirit of lust. Let's say whatever type of woman a guy may be into, if he sees that woman with that, whatever physique he's into, he's going to have an automatic thought. He tells himself, nope, that ain't right. I'm not looking at her like that. It's the same with racism. When people see a Black male, it's automatic thoughts.
True.
What's it? Carl Jung, he talked about the archetypes.
Yeah.
Personally, we all experience lightning and thunder the same way, whether you live in America or you live in Asia or Australia, wherever. We all experience snakes and spiders the same way. Well, Black males universally they're their own archetype, meaning when you see one, there's a set of automatic thoughts that come with it. And that's just how powerfully stigmatized they have been. And so a white person that denies, that, they're going to function on a day-to-day basis in an illusion. And they're going to treat people unfairly and not even know it because they're responding to that person with this set of ideals, denying that they do have this set of ideals ingrained in them. So you have to be deliberate. White people be deliberate to know they have to check their thoughts at the door when engaging Black Americans.
That's deep, you know what I'm saying? And I was thinking also even the equal opposite end, if the way that the stereotypes that go in and how people think about it is kind of like the same way like how you have snakes. They were like, well, this is a garter snake, but they'll be like, or this example, spiders. This is just a granddaddy long leg. But you know what? If you ever see that Black widow, that Black widow spider is the deadliest thing. And so what's the first thing people do? It's the Black widow. Where that raid at? Where I got to find a way to eliminate that Black widow because it's the deadliest thing that, so it's like subconsciously that is already ingrained. And so they act off reflex. Spider may not have even done anything to him. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? Just chilling in the corner in his web. But we
Yeah.
got to get rid of him. And so
Yeah.
that's the same thing of what we're seeing now in society. The same way a black widow spider could just be up in this cobweb in the corner chilling, not really affecting anybody, but the fact that it stigmatizes the deadliest thing, we've got to eliminate it. So it's the same thing we're seeing now. Black people just out there, just barbecuing, just chilling. Oh, that's black people. We got to go eliminate them. You know. Oh, that black kid is selling water. No, but that's a black kid. You know what? Now you got to eliminate. Got to get him out. Trayvon Martin, like a black widow. He's mind his business, but I have to eliminate him.
Because of what I believe about him.
Yeah, got them beliefs, man. Man. Oh boy. I know our time is winding down. I want to shoot off. Do you think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's do this one. Now I've seen YouTube videos of what you do. Now, when you have these conversations and these dialogues on in some of your seminars or on the panels between whites and blacks, what has that dialogue been like, and what have you gotten back in terms of feedback after the seminar or the panel?
Well, thank God. Thankfully, I usually get positive feedback from both sides of the fence, black and white.
Okay. With
Black Americans, it's usually this, like, for one, it's an affirmation. What they, sometimes, the thoughts that you may have as a Black American as it relates to you, society, the future, some of your fears, your concerns, sometimes you'll feel like maybe it's just me thinking like this, or maybe I'm the only one with these type of concerns. And you may be attributing that to something wrong with you, basically. Maybe it's something wrong with me, because maybe I shouldn't be thinking like this. But, after a lot of my presentations, especially with Black males and then the mothers of Black males, it's kind of like, now I see why I think the way I think sometimes. Or now I see why my son has been acting like this. It goes all the way back to that internalized inferiority. And so that's usually the more thematic feedback that I get after a presentation from the Black side. Just that affirmation, like, man, I needed to hear this. I remember when I was going to adolescence, I don't know why I was thinking this way, and I wasn't motivated, I wasn't focused. Steam was low, I was dealing with depression. So much of that has to do with social abuse.
Yes.
On the white side, you get a lot of what I would call, I just say cross-racial empathy, racial empathy. Meaning a lot of times it's like, damn, I've never looked at it like that. Especially, I always use the analogy about the mother and his twins.
Yeah.
And so, I'll have white people say, I grew up abused, and these are all the things that I struggle with now because I was abused. Yes. And imagine if the whole country treated me like that. Now I can see how Black people might have some struggles that maybe other races don't have.
Right.
And so just an increasing of their racial empathy. That's kind of the feedback I get from white Americans after a presentation.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
The other thing I was thinking about is, racism being a power dynamic. And I think even as we think and discuss solutions on how to psychologically restructure our thoughts and break down stigmas and stereotypes that we have and that others have of us and how they view us. Racism also is a power dynamic. And so you're dealing with generations and centuries of wealth that has been accumulated by many whites in America. Like it was, I think it was a New York Times article that was saying it'd take, I forget how many years for African Americans to catch up to whites when it comes to wealth. Then you think about politically the power that's held. You even think economically as far as businesses and corporations that have been in existence for centuries, but was propped up by the grunt work of African Americans, their contributions, and slave labor too, or just being paid very marginal because of your race. So much power has been accumulated, and that power also in the system of racism, that power is weaponized, and the weapon is pointed at African Americans. Even though we psychologically have to restructure ourselves, part of actually, if we want to end racism, it would have to ultimately redistribution of power will have to occur also. And I mean, whether we're talking politically, corporate or business wise, financially, so many other things will have to be just redone. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise we're still at that disadvantaged position that whites have all of this and we don't have that, and they're able to make these different moves and maneuvers in society that we can't make.
Right.
So I mean, that's just something that's thrown on a grill, you know, for a later discussion and all. I just wanted you to do one more thing before we wrapped it up.
All right.
The fraternity, I want you to give a little bit more information on it, what you do, and you know how people can reach out to you, and expect if there are any YouTube links that people should check out that you have about it.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you. Okay. Yeah. So so it's the name of it is Alpha Beta Omega. We call it ABO for short. And basically, it's a leadership development program, but it's packaged in a Black male fraternity. So we have about 100. I think it's 115, the last count, guys in the group. And basically, the purpose of it is to engage them in different activities, experiences, relationships, etc. that promotes their professional development, academic development, personal development, then their career development. And so it's been in existence for like 6 years now. This is finishing up the 6th year. And so the Black males in this program, they academically, they achieve more than 20 percentage point higher rates of academic success than Black males who are not in the program. So the major components of the program is the relational learning thing. So we have mentors or success coaches is what we call them, that the guys are able to meet with on a regular basis to talk about school, to talk about life, to talk about relationships, to talk about whatever it is that you can't talk about in a typical classroom.
Right.
And so it's all about information, giving them instructions and keeping them inspired, keeping them focused, accountability. It's your responsibility to be successful. And so at the end of the day, you got a group of Black males with this, they got different visions, but they all have a vision and they all using the same bridge to get there, which is the bridge of education. And so this year we graduated, I think 24 guys this year, which was a record for our group. So 24 guys in the program graduated this year. And around 20 or so are transferring to 4-year institutions.
Good.
Story short, man, the program works. If you want to get a breakdown of it, if a person listening can go to www.grcc.edu/ABO, and it'll give you the statistical breakdown of how our guys have outperformed the Black males who are not in the program. And it'll give you the mission statement, the vision, the core principles that we function on, things like that. Got you.
Man, that's awesome. But that's specifically for Grand Rapids. Like you have to be in Grand Rapids to.
Yes. Yep. And I think just this community college is the only community college in the country with a fraternity. So more than likely, if somebody wanted to model it, they probably wouldn't model it as a fraternity. It might just be some type of student program or something like that. But so it's specific to Grand Rapids Community College.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, look, brother. Yes, brother, but at the same time, let me make sure I affirm my brother, Dr. Andre Field.
It's
Now, it's important.
It's all
It's
good.
important that we have to do that. You know, it's important. That
Oh yeah, that's real.
So I want to thank you for stopping by with Source Radio Network and SRN Live, and just sharing your work and your works, all your progress and contribution to what you're doing to the African American community, focusing on Black males and how to raise the standard in our performance, and even tackling that tough beast of racism in society. I don't think everybody has. I don't think any one person has the total solution, but I think as a conglomerate, everybody makes a significant contribution in trying to arrive at a very sensible and practical solution. And I think you bring some real meat to the table. So I want to thank you for that.
All right, thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man.
Definitely. So you always got a home here at Source Radio Network and SRN Live.
All right.
If you have any other publications that are coming out or any seminars, and you need to get any push, hit us up, let us know, and we'll definitely push you out there, man.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll look you up.
All right, cool.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, Source Radio Network, SRN Live TV family, we are getting ready to sign out. I'm your host, Dr. Samori Swygert for the Pendulum. We just heard from Dr. Andre Fields, Grand Rapids, Michigan Community College, talking about his book, The Psychology of Racism, one of his 13 books. So we had a great time discussing it. And when you get the video, make sure you share it. And one more time, just got to thank our sponsors because they make all this possible. And that's Zuliana Health and Fitness, Paper to Film Productions, Renovations, New Covenant Praise Worship Center, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Blend to Blend Juice Bar, and Urban Grandstand Digital. And once again, if you want to advertise with us, you can contact Kathy Lynn at kathylynn1971@gmail.com or Tracy Jeffcoat at gmail.com. And we're getting ready to get out. Is there anything else you want to say, brother? Once again, maybe where they can find your stuff or anything like that?
Yeah, if you got questions, you want to reach out, my email address is afields@grcc.edu. So you can hit me up there and I'll gladly answer any questions.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Take care, Doc.
All right, my brother. I'll see you soon, man.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Get at me for beats, yo.